Okay, let's get into it. Imagine, if you can, a single human life that somehow manages to stretch across the absolute widest spectrum of human experience possible.
Right.
And I don't just mean like a rags to riches story. I mean something far more extreme.
We're talking about a spectrum that goes from being literally, and I mean literally worshipped as God incarnate,
The Messiah.
a Messiah returned to earth,
Real.
all the way to ending up as a prisoner in your own home, his remains found under a concrete slab.
Yeah.
Some sources even say near a latrine.
It's a story that feels almost too big for one biography. On one side, you have this icon, the father of modern Africa, a man who stood alone against fascism when, the rest of the world was sort of looking at their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, you have a feudal monarch accused of feeding prime beef to his pet lions while his people starved in a famine he supposedly tried to hide.
It is the absolute definition of a complex legacy.
Mm-hmm.
We are talking, of course, about Haile Selassie I, the last emperor of Ethiopia.
And the mission for this deep dive is, I think, pretty specific. We aren't just doing a timeline, a simple A to B. We have to try and reconcile these completely different versions of the man.
They're almost different people.
They are. We've got the historical records, we have the Rastafari theology, the political history of the Horn of Africa. I mean, I've been buried in these notes all week, and honestly, the aha moments just keep coming.
It's a massive topic. I mean, to really understand Haile Selassie is to understand the history of the 20th century, the history of colonialism, of anti-colonialism, and even the history of new religious movements.
It's all there.
It's all wrapped up in this one man who was, by all accounts, barely over 5 feet tall.
But he casts such a giant shadow. Before we get into the heavy politics, though, we have to talk about the style. The sheer spectacle, the hook details in this research stack are just wild. I knew he was an emperor, but I didn't realize he traveled with a literal pride of lions.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just a metaphor. When we say the Lion of Judah, he took that quite literally.
So this was part of his brand.
It was his brand and his diplomacy. Before he was even emperor, when he was regent and touring Europe in the 1920s, he brought lions as diplomatic gifts.
Wait, actual live lions?
Live lions.
Yeah.
He gave one to the president of France, one to the prime minister of France, even one to King George V in Britain.
Can you just imagine the logistics of that? Or the conversation? Your Excellency, we have a gift for you from Rastafari. Where should we put his lion?
It certainly made an impression. The press went crazy. It created this sensation they called Oriental dignity. It established him immediately as someone from a different world, an ancient world of almost biblical power.
I see.
But as we're going to see, beneath that spectacle of lions and gold capes was a very, very shrewd and in many ways a very modern political operator.
So, okay, let's go back to the source. Before the lions, before the throne, he wasn't born Haile Selassie.
No, not at all. And names are incredibly important in this whole story. He was born on July 23rd, 1892, in the Derg province of Ethiopia. His given name was Tafari Makonnen.
And Tafari, that name has a specific meaning, right? I saw that in the note.
It does. It means one who is respected or feared.
Wow. That feels incredibly prophetic for a kid who would grow up to be both in just extreme measures.
It really does. And his title was Lish Tafari, which means child, and it designated his noble blood. His father, Haile Makonnen, was a legend in his own right.
Okay.
He was a top general, a key player in the Battle of Adwa in 1896, which is, that's one of the most important moments in modern African history.
That's where Ethiopia defeated the Italians the first time, right?
The first time, yes. A stunning victory that reverberated across the world. But the real key to understanding Tafari's rise and his entire psychology is the lineage.
The Solomonic dynasty. I fell down such a rabbit hole reading about this. This isn't just claiming, your grandfather was a king. This is a claim that goes back thousands of years.
Precisely.
Yeah.
This is the cultural and religious glue that held the Ethiopian empire together. The dynasty claims direct descent from Menelik I.
And Menelik I, according to the Kebra Nagast, which is the Ethiopian national epic, he was the son of King Solomon of ancient Israel and Makeda, the queen of Sheba.
Correct. So in the eyes of the Ethiopian people and, eventually the Rastafari movement, this man has the blood of the Bible, of the Old Testament, flowing directly through his veins.
That gives his rule a kind of divine right, that is. It's hard for a modern secular mind to really grasp.
It is. It wasn't just that he was the strongest warlord or the smartest politician. It was that he was chosen by God, part of an unbroken chain going back to antiquity.
But here's the thing that surprised me. In the early 1900s, that bloodline wasn't enough to guarantee him the throne. He wasn't the heir apparent.
No, he was not. He had to hustle, he had to scheme, he had to be smarter than everyone else in the room.
Right, he had to work for it. The Newts mentioned he became a governor at age 13. I was, I don't know, barely managing my paper route at 13.
No question. He was appointed Dejazmak, which
Yeah.
is roughly equivalent to a count or maybe a duke at 13.
Mm.
But his path to the top was blocked by Ieyasu.
Ieyasu.
Okay. He was the appointed heir, the grandson of the great Emperor Menelik II. And this is where we see the first real glimpse of Tafari's political genius.
Ieyasu was the one who flirted with Islam, is that right?
That was the accusation, yes. And in a staunchly Orthodox Christian empire, that was political poison. Ieyasu was seen as getting too cozy with Muslim powers in the region. He was accused of apostasy.
Which gave Tafari an opening.
A huge one. Tafari Makonnen, along with the leadership of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and a faction of the nobility, orchestrated a coup in 1916. Ieyasu was deposed, and Menelik's daughter, Suditu, became empress.
So Suditu takes the throne, but Tafari doesn't. Not yet.
Not yet. He played the long game, he became Rastafari Makonnen, and more importantly, regent plenipotentiary.
Which is basically what prime minister.
Think of it as the CEO to the empress's chairman of the board. He was running the day-to-day of the country, but he had to be careful. Empress Suditu was very conservative, very traditionalist. Tafari was the young Turk, the modernizer.
So he's pushing for change.
Constantly. He wanted schools, hospitals, airplanes, international recognition. He was looking outwards to the future. She was looking inwards to the past.
It seems like a very stressful roommate situation for the entire country.
It was a delicate, 14-year-long dance of power. But he was brilliant at it. He managed to secure Ethiopia's admission to the League of Nations in 1923.
Which was a massive deal.
A massive diplomatic coup. It put Ethiopia on the map as a sovereign state, and equal to the European nations, at least on paper.
And then in 1930, Empress Suditu dies, and Rastafari Makonnen finally steps into the spotlight.
The coronation, November 2nd, 1930. This was the event of the decade, globally.
The description of this coronation is just, it's mind-blowing. It really does sound like something out of a fantasy novel.
It was designed to be awe-inspiring. This is the moment he took the regnal name Haile Selassie I, which means power of the Trinity.
And the full title. It's like poetry.
It is. By the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I, Kings of Ethiopia, Lord of Lords, elect of God.
King of Kings. Nagusa Nagas. That's not a subtle title. It implies that everyone else, every other monarch in the world, is just a regular king, but he's the boss.
That's exactly the message. And the guest list reflected that. The British sent the Duke of Gloucester, a royal prince. You had envoys from Japan, Egypt, Italy. The U.S. Time magazine put him on the cover. It was a global spectacle.
Cost.
One report estimated the cost at over $3 million.
In 1930 dollars. That's the start of the Great Depression. That is an absolutely astronomical amount of money.
It was. And that tension, between the immense, almost fairy tale wealth of the monarchy and the deep poverty of the nation, that's a theme that runs through this entire story right to the very end.
Of course.
But at the time, it was seen as necessary to project strength and ancient legitimacy.
Mm-hmm.
He sent a gold-encased Bible to an American bishop just for saying a prayer for him. It was all about establishing this image on the world stage.
But he wasn't just throwing parties. He was trying to modernize the country, at least on his own terms. The 1931 Constitution is a big part of this.
Right.
In the notes, it's framed as this great step forward. But when you actually look at the text, it's a bit tricky, isn't it?
It is a classic example of what you might call authoritarian modernization.
Yeah.
Yes, it was Ethiopia's first ever written constitution. That's historic. It set up a bicameral legislature, 2 houses of parliament. On the surface, that looks like a move towards democracy. But you have to ask, who appointed the members of the upper house?
The emperor.
And who had the final absolute veto on all laws?
The emperor.
Right, so it was democracy with training wheels,
Mm-hmm.
but the emperor was holding the handlebars, steering the bike, and had his foot on the brake.
So the goal wasn't really democracy. It was centralization.
Precisely. The stated goal in the text was a transition to democratic rule, but only, and I'm quoting here, until the people are in a position to elect themselves.
Which the emperor gets to decide.
Which the emperor gets to decide. It was a brilliant move to consolidate power away from the regional warlords and centralize it in the palace in Addis Ababa. It was modern state building, but it was definitely not freedom in the Western sense.
And then, just as he's getting started with this project, this grand vision for a modern Ethiopia, the sky falls, literally.
The Italian invasion of 1935.
The Second Italo-Ethiopian War. This is the turning point, isn't it? This is where he goes from being a national leader to a global figure.
It changes everything. Mussolini's in power in Italy, fascism is on the rise, and Italy has this 40-year-old grudge from the Battle of Adwa.
They wanted revenge.
They wanted revenge, they wanted a new Roman Empire, and they wanted to link their colonies in Eritrea and Somaliland by conquering the land in between.
The mismatch in technology here is just heartbreaking to read about. You look at the mobilization order from Selassie, everyone able-bodied, but what were they fighting with?
Courage, mostly. And old rifles, some from the 19th century, spears, swords. The Italians had a modern air force. They had tanks. And most horrifically, they had chemical weapons.
Mustard gas.
Yes. This is one of the darkest chapters in modern colonial history, and it's often overlooked. The Italians completely violated the Geneva Protocol. They dropped mustard gas bombs not just on soldiers, but on civilians, on farms, on rivers, even on Red Cross hospitals.
It's pure terror warfare.
It burns the skin, it blinds the eyes, it destroys the lungs. It was designed to break the will of a people.
And Selassie, he actually went to the front. He wasn't just directing from the palace.
No, he did. He led troops personally at the decisive Battle of Mechu in 1936. But you can't fight mustard gas with bravery alone. The Ethiopian army was shattered. Yeah. And this led to the most agonizing decision of his entire life.
The exile debate.
Yes. I found this part fascinating because his advisors were completely split. One side is saying, you are the emperor, you are the Lion of Judah, you stay and die with your people. If you leave, you're a coward.
The honorable death.
Right. Noblemen like Bladatekel Woldhoriot were adamant about it. They wanted to wage a guerrilla war from the mountains, with the emperor as a symbol of resistance on home soil.
But the other side had a different view, a more legalistic one.
A more modern statecraft view. They argued that if the emperor died or was captured, the Ethiopian state would cease to exist legally. The Italians could just claim it was an internal matter. They argued he needed to go abroad to embody the sovereign state and plead Ethiopia's case to the world.
So he chooses exile.
He chooses exile. He boards a British train, then a cruiser. He goes first to Jerusalem.
Which is heavy with symbolism. The king of the Solomonic dynasty returning to the land of Solomon.
Exactly. And then to Europe. And this leads to the moment that I think makes him a legend. The speech to the League of Nations in Geneva, June 1936.
It is one of the greatest and most tragic speeches of the 20th century.
You have to picture this scene. The hall is filled with European diplomats who are basically just trying to ignore the problem, hoping it will go away. Fascist Italian journalists are in the gallery, and they're heckling him, whistling, screaming abuse, trying to shout him down.
And this small, dignified man stands at the podium, and he starts speaking in Amharic.
Which was a deliberate and powerful choice. He spoke fluent French, which was the language of diplomacy. He could have easily given the speech in French.
But he used his own language.
He was asserting his identity, his nation's sovereignty, right there in the heart of Europe. He laid out the cold, hard facts of the chemical attacks. He shamed them. He called out the idea of collective security for what it was, a total sham.
And then he drops that line, that prophecy. It gives me chills every time I read it.
It is us today. It will be you tomorrow. He was telling the West, in no uncertain terms, you think you can ignore fascism because it's happening in Africa? It is coming for you.
And he was 100% right. World War II was just 3 years away.
He became the conscience of the world in that moment. Time magazine named him Man of the Year. He became this global icon of anti-fascist resistance.
Yeah.
But, and this is the great tragedy of international politics,
the League did nothing.
Nothing meaningful.
Yeah.
They imposed some weak, partial sanctions that didn't even include oil, which is the one thing that could have stopped Mussolini's war machine. They basically just wrung their hands and let Mussolini have Ethiopia.
So he ends up in Bath, England, an emperor in exile living in a house called Fairfield House.
Yes. And we should spend a moment on what that life was actually like. He wasn't living in some gilded palace. He was cash-strapped. He was, by all accounts, deeply depressed. He spent his days writing his autobiography, walking in the dreary English rain, lobbying anyone who would listen to him.
And the news from home was just devastating.
Horrific. The Italians were carrying out brutal reprisals. They executed his son-in-law. His own daughter, Princess Romonwerk, was captured and died in an Italian prison camp.
It's just such a human image. The King of Kings shivering in a drafty English house, grieving his children, while the world just moves on. But he didn't give up.
He never gave up. And when World War II finally broke out, the British suddenly realized, hey, This Ethiopian emperor could be a very useful ally against the Italians in East Africa.
So in 1941, he returns.
He returns with a legendary special forces unit called Gideon Force.
Gideon Force, great
It
name.
was a mix of British officers like the eccentric genius Ord Wingate and Ethiopian patriots who'd been fighting a guerrilla war for years. They fought their way back into the country, rallying the people. And on May 5th, 1941,
Let me guess.
exactly 5 years to the day after the Italians had entered, Addis Ababa Haile Selassie re-entered his capital in triumph.
That moment must have been just electric.
He raised the Line of Judah standard over the palace again. He was vindicated. He had been right all along.
So the war is over, the emperor is back on the throne, and this kicks off his second act. He pivots from being a war hero to being the diplomat, the father of Africa.
This is the era of the 1950s and 60s. Decolonization is sweeping the continent. Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, Nigeria, they all fighting for and winning their independence. And Ethiopia, because it had this long history of resisting colonization, becomes the ultimate symbol of black freedom and sovereignty.
And Selassie positions himself right at the center of it all.
He does it masterfully. He makes Addis Ababa the political capital of Africa. In 1963, he presides over the formation of the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, the precursor to the African Union we have today.
And getting all those new leaders in one room was not easy.
It was incredibly difficult. You had the Monrovia group, who were more moderate pro-Western, and you had the Casablanca group, the radicals like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, who wanted a United States of Africa immediately.
A huge ideological divide.
A huge divide. And Selassie was really the only one with the historical weight and the gravitas to get them all in the same room and hammer out a compromise.
He was the bridge.
He was the elder statesman. He steered a middle path. He supported decolonization movements. But he was also a conservative monarch who was, meeting with President Kennedy. He was the first foreign head of state to meet Mao Zedong after the crisis of the Cultural Revolution. He was mediating peace deals between Morocco and Algeria.
A true global figure, and the Lions probably helped maintain the mystique, I assume.
The Lions always helped. He maintained that aura of Oriental dignity perfectly. For 2 decades, he really was the elder statesman of the world.
But while he's doing all this high-level geopolitical maneuvering, something completely different and, frankly, kind of mystical is happening on the other side of the planet, in Jamaica.
The Rastafari movement. This is where the story leaves the realm of politics and history and enters straight into theology. It's an incredible turn.
We have to unpack this because for a lot of people, especially in the West, this is the only context they have for Haile Selassie. Bob Marley, dreadlocks, reggae music. How does a devout Ethiopian Orthodox Christian emperor become God to people in the Caribbean?
It starts with Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican Pan-Africanist activist. In the 1920s, he preached this message of black pride and return to Africa. And he supposedly uttered a prophecy. Look to Africa, where a black king shall be crowned, for he shall be the Redeemer.
And then in 1930, Tafari Makonnen gets crowned in that spectacular ceremony.
And you just have to look at the titles again from their perspective. King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah.
These are titles straight out of the Bible.
Straight out of the book of Revelation. For poor, marginalized communities in Jamaica who were reading the King James Bible every day, this wasn't a coincidence. They didn't see a political leader. They saw the fulfillment of prophecy. They saw Jah, God incarnate, return to earth.
It's such a powerful narrative of reclamation. But for decades, this was just a belief system far away. Then, in 1966, the emperor decides to visit Jamaica.
Coronation Day, April 21st, 1966. I mean, if you want a scene for a movie, this is it. It's one of the most remarkable state visits in history.
Set the stage for us. What happened?
He lands at Palisadoes Airport in Kingston. There are an estimated 100,000 Rastafari waiting for him. They have come from all over the island. They've been waiting their whole lives for their Messiah to arrive. The drumming is incessant. And the smoke. Every contemporary account says the air was literally thick with a haze of ganja smoke.
100,000 people. That is just intense.
It was completely overwhelming. When the plane finally taxied to a stop, the crowd just broke through the barriers. They rushed the tarmac. They surrounded the airplane, touching it, kissing the tires, chanting, Jah, Rastafari.
And the emperor?
He looked out the window at this chaotic, ecstatic scene, and he refused to come out.
He was scared.
He was probably terrified. He was a man who prized order and dignity above all else. He locked the door. The Jamaican government officials didn't know what to do. The police were completely useless against that crowd.
So what did they do?
They finally had to find a prominent Rasta elder, a man named Ross Mortimer Plano, to go up the stairs, knock on the door, and basically negotiate with God. to tell him it was safe to come down and meet his followers.
That is unbelievable. And when he finally stepped out...
Pandemonium, pure joy. Rita Marley, Bob Marley's wife, was in the crowd. She later claimed that as he waved, she saw the stigmata, the nail wounds of Christ in the palm of his hand. That was the moment she converted.
Wow. Now here is the million-dollar question. Did he ever tell them, guys, look, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I am not God?
This is the source of endless debate and interpretation. He was a devout Christian. Technically, for him, claiming to be God would be the ultimate blasphemy, but...
But he didn't.
He didn't rebuke them. He didn't take the microphone and say, stop this nonsense.
Why not? What's the thinking there?
Some say it was just political pragmatism. Why alienate these people who adored him? Others say he was genuinely and deeply moved by their love and faith. He gave gold medallions to the Rasta elders, and he gave them a very specific, very clever instruction. He said, liberation before repatriation.
Liberation before repatriation, what does that mean?
Well, the Rastas wanted to go back to Africa immediately. Selassie had even granted 500 hectares of land in Shashamane, Ethiopia, for them to settle. But he told them, essentially, don't leave yet. You have work to do here in Jamaica. You must liberate the people of Jamaica first.
That is such a savvy political and spiritual answer. It validates them, but it keeps them constructive where they are.
Exactly. He walked a very, very fine line. He accepted their worship without ever explicitly confirming it in his own words.
So on the world stage, he is this master diplomat. In Jamaica, he is literally a god. But back home in Ethiopia, things are starting to rot.
This is the heartbreaking final act of the tragedy. This is section 5 of our outline. While the emperor was being toasted in London and worshipped in Kingston, the foundations of his own empire were crumbling from the inside.
It's the classic tragedy of a leader who becomes so focused on foreign policy that they neglect what's happening in their own backyard.
And he was a modernizer, but he was too slow. He couldn't, or perhaps wouldn't, dismantle the feudal system that his own power rested on. Land ownership was still totally medieval. Peasants had to give huge portions of their harvest to absentee landlords. And the cracks started showing long before the end. There was a coup attempt in 1960 while he was away in Brazil. That was a huge shock. The army put it down, but it was the first time anyone had seriously challenged his absolute power. Then you have the war in Eritrea.
The annexation of Eritrea in 1962 was a complete disaster, wasn't it?
A catastrophe. It dissolved Eritrea's parliament and sparked a brutal 30-year civil war that drained the treasury and the morale of the army for decades. But the thing that truly, finally destroyed him was the famine.
The Wallow famine of 1973?
Yes. There had been famines before, but this one was different. It was different because of the cover-up. Tens of thousands of people were starving to death. The most common estimate is between 40,000 and 80,000 people. And the imperial government actively tried to hide it. They didn't want to embarrass the nation or the emperor. They were celebrating the 10th anniversary of the OAU. They wanted to project an image of success and stability.
And then came the journalist Jonathan Dimbleby.
A British journalist. He heard rumors, and he smuggled film crews into the famine zones. He produced a documentary for British television called The Unknown Famine. And the editing of this film, it was absolutely lethal.
What did it show?
It used a technique called montage, a simple but devastating contrast. It cut back and forth between images of skeletal children dying in the dust, their mothers wailing, and official government footage of the emperor at a lavish palace banquet for his birthday, eating cake, drinking champagne, tossing prime cuts of meat from the table to his little dogs.
That is an image you can't ever recover from.
You can't. It aired in Britain, but more importantly, copies were smuggled back into Ethiopia and shown secretly to university students and junior army officers. It shattered the myth. He wasn't the benevolent father of the nation anymore. He was a senile, out-of-touch tyrant who didn't care if his people died.
So the revolution begins in 1974. But it wasn't a sudden explosion, was it? The notes describe it as something much slower, much stranger.
They called it the creeping coup. And it was fascinatingly macabre. The Derg, which means committee, in Amharic, this group of anonymous junior military officers, they didn't just storm the palace. They stripped his power away layer by layer, over months.
Like peeling an onion.
Exactly. First, they arrested his ministers, one by one. Then they nationalized the imperial family's bus company. Then they arrested his grandson. They were testing the waters, seeing if anyone, the senior generals, the public would stop them.
And nobody did.
Nobody did. The spell was broken.
That must have been terrifying for him, just sitting in that massive palace, this old man, watching the lights go out one by one.
He seemed almost paralyzed by it. He was 82 years old. He'd been in power for almost 60 years. I think he truly believed, perhaps, that his divine right, his destiny, would somehow protect him. It didn't.
September 12, 1974. The end of the line.
A group of junior officers went to the palace. They read a proclamation deposing him for crimes against the people. And then, this detail always gets me. They didn't put him in a limousine or an army truck. They put the King of Kings, the Lion of Judah, into the back of a small, light blue Volkswagen Beetle.
A VW Beetle.
It was a calculated, deliberate humiliation. They drove him away as crowds who had once worshipped him now shouted "thief" at the little car. He was imprisoned in a small apartment within the Grand Palace grounds.
And then came the blood.
Black Saturday. In November of 1974, the Derg rounded up 60 of the highest officials of the old regime without any trial. 2 former prime ministers, the emperor's own grandson, generals, aristocrats, all taken to a prison yard and machine-gunned, buried in a mass grave. It was the signal that the old world was well and truly dead.
But Selassie himself lingered for a few more months as their prisoner.
Until August of 1975. The official story put out by the Derg regime was that he died of respiratory failure following complications from prostate surgery.
Which was a complete lie.
A total lie. The doctor who supposedly performed the surgery hadn't seen him in months and later confirmed he was in good health. It wasn't until 1994, after the Derg regime was finally overthrown, that the truth came out in court.
What happened?
2 of his former servants testified. They were there that night. They saw the Derg officers enter the emperor's room with a pillow and a cord.
He was strangled in his bed.
Assassinated. The 83-year-old emperor was smothered to death in his sleep. And then, and this is the final awful indignity, they didn't even give him a proper burial. They took his body and buried him secretly beneath the floorboards of the palace office, under a slab of concrete. Some accounts say it was specifically placed near a latrine just to desecrate his memory.
They tried to literally pave over him, to erase him from history.
They tried, but as we said right in the beginning, you can't erase a figure like this. In 1992, after the revolution against the Derg, they dug up the floor. They found the bones.
And in the year 2000, he finally got a funeral.
He did. It was a huge controversial event. The new government didn't want to make it an official state funeral, but thousands and thousands of people turned up. Old veterans in their tattered uniforms, weeping in the streets for their lost king.
And the Rastafari, what do they make of the bones in the funeral?
For many of them, they reject it entirely. Their mantra is, Jah cannot die. To them, the bones are a hoax or they're irrelevant. Haile Selassie is a spiritual force, not a biological entity. You can't bury God under a concrete slab.
So after all this, we're left with this incredible mosaic. The modernizer who is too archaic to save himself, the diplomat who couldn't save his own throne, the god who was murdered in his bed.
It leaves us with a really provocative thought, I think, about the nature of great men or of historical figures in general. Haile Selassie, the man, was flawed, he was tragic, and in the end, he was utterly defeated. But Haile Selassie, the symbol, the Lion of Judah, the anti-fascist icon, Jah Rastafari, that symbol is arguably stronger and more influential today than it was even when he was alive.
The symbol outlived the man.
By a long shot. And it probably always will.
Well, that is a lot to process. From the League of Nations to the ganja haze of Kingston to the back of a Volkswagen Beetle, what a journey.
A journey unlike any other in the 20th century.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.